My desk at Reynolds Architecture and Design had been in the same corner for 12 years. 12 years of deadlines met, 12 years of solutions found, 12 years of loyal service. The light from the floor-to-ceiling windows washed over my drafting table each morning, illuminating the precision of my technical drawings and the innovative touches I'd become known for among my colleagues. Not among management, though. Never among management. I'm Sofia Vasquez, 47, Senior Project Coordinator at Reynolds. Or at least I was until last Friday. My colleagues used to joke that I was the company's secret weapon, the problem solver, the one who could take a failing project and breathe new life into it. The one who worked late when everyone else had gone home. "Sophia, you're a magician," Marcus from the engineering department would say when I found elegant solutions to seemingly impossible structural challenges. "How do you see what the rest of us miss?" I'd smile and shrug it off. Just doing my job. But secretly, I treasured those moments of recognition from my peers. They were rare gems in an otherwise thankless existence under Karen Mitchell's supervision. Karen arrived at Reynolds 5 years ago, swept in with her Harvard degree and connections to luxury developers that the firm desperately wanted to court. At 38, she was younger than me, sleeker than me, and infinitely more polished. Where I was methodical and reserved, Karen was charismatic and commanding. Where I dedicated myself to the quality of our work, Karen dedicated herself to being seen. "We're bringing Karen on as creative director," Mr. Reynolds announced during a staff meeting. "Her vision aligns perfectly with where we want to take the company." I nodded politely, even as I felt the first twist of unease. I had been at Reynolds for 7 years at that point. I had helped build the firm's portfolio from the ground up. But I wasn't surprised that I hadn't been considered for the position. I was never the one in the spotlight. Within months, Karen had restructured the department. I was assigned directly under her supervision, which initially seemed promising. Perhaps now my work would finally receive proper recognition. How naive I was. The first time it happened, I thought it was an honest mistake. We had been working on the Westlake Commercial Complex, a project that was hemorrhaging money due to inefficient design choices. I had stayed late every night for a week, revising the plans to maximize space utilization while preserving the aesthetic integrity the client wanted. "I think I've found a solution," I told Karen, spreading my new designs across her desk. "If we reconfigure the atrium like this and adjust these support structures, we can save nearly 20% on materials without compromising the design concept." Karen studied my work, her manicured finger tracing the lines of my drawing. "This is actually quite good, Sophia. Leave these with me. I'll review them more thoroughly and get back to you." The next day, I sat silently in the project meeting as Karen presented my redesign as her own breakthrough. "After careful consideration," she said, making eye contact with Mr. Reynolds, "I realized we could preserve the client's vision while dramatically cutting costs by reimagining the atrium space like this." Mr. Reynolds was impressed. "Brilliant work, Karen. This is exactly why we brought you on." I felt the blood rush to my face. I opened my mouth to speak, then closed it again. What would I say? That my boss had stolen my idea? Without proof, it would be my word against hers. And in the 5 short months she'd been with the company, Karen had already become Mr. Reynolds' golden child. So I said nothing. I told myself it was a one-time thing. That next time, I would be prepared. I would document my work more carefully. I would make sure there was no ambiguity about who had contributed what, but there was always a next time, and another after that. The Riverfront Hotel renovation, my value engineering saved them $300,000 in construction costs. Karen's brilliant cost-cutting strategy, according to the company newsletter. The Oakwood residences, my innovative use of sustainable materials, earned the project a green building certification. Karen's forward-thinking environmental approach, according to the press release. The Madison Square office tower, My complete redesign of the mechanical systems reduced energy consumption by 40%. Karen's groundbreaking efficiency model, according to Mr. Reynolds when he announced her promotion to Executive Creative Director. For 5 years, I watched my work build Karen's career. For 5 years, I documented everything meticulously, dated drafts, email trails, recorded conversations when legal, and kept them in a secure folder on my personal drive. For 5 years, I waited for the right moment to speak up, to claim what was mine, but the right moment never came. Instead, things got worse. It began with small criticisms in team meetings. Sophia's proposal is a good starting point, but it needs significant refinement. Then came the private conversations. I'm concerned about your performance lately, Sophia. Your designs aren't as innovative as they used to be. Then the impossible deadlines, the exclusion from key meetings, the gradual isolation from the projects I had once led. I knew what was happening. Karen was pushing me out. My detailed documentation of my work had made me dangerous to her, even though she didn't know I was keeping records. She sensed a threat, and like any predator, she was moving to eliminate it. The breaking point came on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks ago. I had been working on a pitch for the Peterson Museum expansion, a prestigious project that could cement Reynolds' reputation in cultural architecture. I had poured everything into this design, innovative exhibition spaces that flowed organically from one to the next, natural lighting solutions that would protect the artifacts while creating a warm, inviting atmosphere for visitors. I had just put the finishing touches on my presentation when Karen appeared at my desk. Sophia, I need to speak with you in my office, now. Her tone made my stomach tighten. I followed her into her glass-walled office, the corner space that overlooked the city skyline, the office I had once hoped might someday be mine. Karen closed the door and took a seat behind her immaculate desk. We've decided to go in a different direction with the Peterson pitch? Different direction? I repeated, struggling to keep my voice even. What does that mean? It means your concepts aren't what we're looking for. They're too conventional. The Peterson needs something bold, something that makes a statement. My designs do make a statement, I said, fighting to keep the tremor from my voice. They prioritize the visitor experience and the preservation of the exhibits, which is exactly what the museum board emphasized in their brief. Karen sighed, as if my defense was tiresome. Sophia, this isn't a debate. The decision's been made. Archer will be taking lead on the Peterson pitch. Archer, a junior designer who had been with the company for less than a year. A talented kid, sure, but nowhere near experienced enough to lead a project of this magnitude. That doesn't make sense, I said, my professional composure beginning to crack. Archer is still learning the basics of museum design requirements. This project needs someone with experience. Are you questioning my judgment? Karen's voice had an edge that silenced the room. No, I'm trying to understand the rationale behind this decision. Karen leaned forward, her perfectly styled hair falling around her face in a way that seemed calculated rather than casual. The rationale is that your work isn't cutting edge anymore, Sophia. You've been with Reynolds for what, 10 years now? 12, I corrected. 12 years, she repeated with a faint smile. And in that time, what have you really contributed? Solid work? Sure. Reliable work. But nothing that defines us as a firm. Nothing that wins awards or attracts the clients we want. The injustice of her words felt like a physical blow. Every major client Reynolds had secured in the past 5 years had been at least partly due to my designs that Karen had presented as her own. I've contributed plenty, I said quietly, my hands gripping the arms of my chair to stop them from shaking. If you review my portfolio, I have reviewed your portfolio, Karen cut me off, and frankly, it's not impressive enough to justify your salary at this point. The industry is changing, Sophia. Reynolds is changing, and I'm not convinced you're changing with us. The implication was clear. I was being sidelined, possibly being prepared for termination. After 12 years of dedication, after countless nights and weekends sacrificed for this company, after watching my innovations build someone else's career. "Is there anything else?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm despite the storm raging. Inside me, Karen seemed surprised, perhaps even a little disappointed by my restraint. She had expected an outburst, I realized. She had wanted one. Something she could document, something she could use against me. "No, that's all for now. Please transfer all your Peterson files to Archer by the end of the day." I nodded and stood up, my movements mechanical. As I reached the door, Karen added, "Oh, and Sophia, I'd like you to take on more of a supporting role for the next few months. Help the junior staff with their technical drawings, review code compliance, that sort of thing. It might be a better fit for your skill set." I turned back to face her, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would feel like to tell her exactly what I thought of her. To reveal that I knew what she had been doing all these years. To watch her carefully constructed facade crumble. Instead, I said, "Of course, whatever the team needs," and walked out. That evening, as I transferred my Peterson files to Archer's directory as instructed, I noticed something strange. A set of files in a shared folder that shouldn't have been accessible to me. Files labeled A&H proposals with dates from the past 2 years, A&H, Archer and Hayes, our biggest competitor in the region. Curiosity piqued, I opened one of the files, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It was my design for the riverfront. Hotel renovation. Not the watered-down version that had actually been built, but my original, more ambitious concept. The one that Karen had deemed too expensive and impractical before taking my cost-saving measures and presenting them as her own. Only this wasn't labeled as a Reynolds project. The title block read, "Archer and Hayes Architectural Concepts." With trembling hands, I opened another file, and another. My designs for the past 2 years, the ones Karen had rejected, the ones that had mysteriously not fit with the company's direction, were all there. All relabeled, all being sold to our competitor. Karen wasn't just taking credit for my work. She was selling the ideas she rejected to our direct competitor. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt and frustration I had carried for 5 years crystallized into something harder, something colder, something focused. I wasn't just going to document my work anymore. I wasn't just going to wait for recognition. I was going to take back what was mine. I carefully copied the A&H files to my secure personal drive, making sure to preserve all the metadata that showed when and how they had been created and modified. Then I closed everything and left the office, my face betraying nothing of the revelation I had just experienced. 2 days later, Karen called me into her office again. This time, Mr. Reynolds was there too, his normally jovial face uncharacteristically serious. "Sophia," Karen began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We've had to make some difficult decisions in light of the company's current direction. I knew what was coming. I had known the moment I discovered those files that Karen would move to eliminate me as quickly as possible. She couldn't risk me finding out what she'd been doing. "We're going to have to let you go," Mr. Reynolds said, looking uncomfortable but resolved. "Karen has expressed concerns about your performance over the past year, and after reviewing your recent work, I have to agree that it might be time for a change." "I see," I said, my voice calm despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "And what specific concerns are there about my performance?" Karen jumped in smoothly. "Your designs have become stagnant, Sophia. You're not innovating anymore. And your attitude. There have been concerns about your willingness to collaborate." "My attitude," I repeated flatly. "Several team members have reported feeling intimidated by your criticism of their ideas." Karen continued, the lie flowing easily from her lips. "I could have argued. I could have pointed out that I was known throughout the office as a patient mentor. I could have named a dozen junior designers who had flourished under my guidance. But I didn't, because it wouldn't have mattered. Karen had already decided my fate, and Mr. Reynolds trusted her judgment. "We're prepared to offer you a severance package," Mr. Reynolds said, pushing a folder across the desk toward me. 3 months' salary, continuation of benefits for 60 days, and a letter of recommendation. A letter of recommendation from the people who were firing me for supposedly poor performance and a bad attitude. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. "When would my last day be?" I asked, not touching the folder. "Today, actually," Karen replied, not quite managing to hide her satisfaction. "It will help you clear out your desk and collect your personal items. Today. No notice, no transition period. A clean, swift cut designed to minimize damage." "I understand," I said, meeting Karen's gaze steadily. "I'll clear out my desk right away." As I stood up to leave, Karen said, "I truly am sorry it's—" "Come to this, Sophia. You've been with Reynolds a long time." I looked at her perfectly composed face, her practiced expression of regret, and for the first time in 5 years, I allowed myself a small, knowing smile. "Yes, I have," I said quietly. "And I've learned a lot in that time. More than you might think." Something flickered in Karen's eyes, a momentary uncertainty, quickly masked. But I had seen it, and it was enough for now. I walked out of that office with my head held high, past the curious gazes of my colleagues, past the desk where I had spent 12 years of my life, and out into the bright light of a Wednesday afternoon. They thought they had seen the last of Sofia Vasquez, the reliable, quiet worker bee. The woman who took orders and never complained. The woman who could be used and discarded without consequences. They were wrong. They had never really seen me at all. But they were about to. The first week after my termination passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Anger that burned so hot it sometimes left me breathless. Grief for the career I had built and lost. Fear about what would come next. But beneath it all, running like a steady current, was determination. I had walked out of Reynolds with more than just my personal belongings. I had walked out with nearly 5 years of meticulous documentation. Original drafts of my designs with timestamps and electronic signatures, emails detailing my contributions, recorded meetings where I had presented concepts that later appeared under Karen's name, and, most damning of all, the evidence that Karen had been selling my rejected designs to Archer and Hayes. On the 8th day of my unemployment, I sat at my dining table, which had become my new workspace, and began to truly organize what I had. I created a timeline of projects, linking each one to the evidence I had collected. And as the picture became clearer, so did my resolve. My phone rang, interrupting my concentration. It was Marcus from engineering. "Sophia," he said, when I answered, his voice a mixture of concern and anger. "What the hell happened?" Karen's telling. "Everyone you were let go for performance issues, but nobody's buying it." I closed my eyes, touched by his loyalty, but cautious about what to share. "It's complicated, Marcus." "It's bullshit is what it is," he said bluntly. "You were the backbone of that place. Everyone knows it. Everyone except management, apparently," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. There was a pause before Marcus spoke again, his voice lower now. "Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but strange things have been happening since you left. Karen's completely reorganized the department. She's taken over all your projects personally, won't even let the junior designers touch them. And yesterday, I overheard her telling Reynolds that Archer and Hayes somehow got hold of design concepts similar to ones we were developing internally." My heart raced. What did Reynolds say? He was furious, of course. Talked about possible legal action against A&H for corporate espionage. But Karen convinced him it would be bad publicity for the firm. Of course she did. The last thing Karen wanted was a legal investigation that might expose her own actions. "There's something else," Marcus continued hesitantly. "The Peterson Museum project? The one Karen pulled you from? She's presented a new concept to the board that looks, Well, it looks a lot like the preliminary sketches I saw on your desk a few weeks ago, but more refined. I sat up straighter, my grip on the phone tightening. Are you sure? Positive. The flowing exhibition spaces, the natural lighting solutions. It's your vision, Sophia. She's just put her name on it. The confirmation of what I had suspected sent a wave of renewed anger through me, but I forced myself to remain calm. Thank you for telling me, Marcus. I appreciate you reaching out. What are you going to do? He asked. It was a good question. What was I going to do? Confront Karen directly? Go over her head to Reynolds? Take legal action? I'm still figuring that out, I admitted. But I'm not going to just disappear, I can tell you that much. After we hung up, I returned to my documentation with renewed purpose. If Karen was presenting my Peterson Museum design as her own, I needed to establish my ownership conclusively. I pulled up my earliest sketches and notes for the project, dated files that clearly showed the evolution of the concept, my concept. I had backups of everything, thank God, including drafts I had created on the company's system. And there was something else. A recording from a preliminary meeting where I had first pitched the core ideas to the team, with Karen present. I added these to my growing file of evidence. Then I took a deep breath and made the call I had been putting off for over a week. Elena Garcia had been my classmate in architecture school. While I had chosen the stability of a firm like Reynolds, Elena had taken a different path, eventually opening her own boutique practice specializing in legal consulting for architectural copyright and intellectual property disputes. Sophia Vasquez, she said warmly when she answered. It's been too long. How are you? I've been better, I admitted. I need your professional advice, Elena. I laid out the situation for her, the years of Karen taking credit for my work, my recent termination, and the discovery that she had been selling my designs to a competitor. Elena listened without interruption, and I could almost picture her, taking notes in the precise, organized way she always had in school. Send me everything you have, she said when I finished. Designs, emails, recordings, all of it. I'll review it and tell you where you stand legally. What can I expect? I asked, needing some hint of hope to cling to. Elena was silent for a moment, considering. Based on what you've told me, you have a strong case for intellectual property theft and possibly fraudulent termination. But corporate cases like this can get messy, Sophia. Karen will have the company's legal resources behind her. Are you prepared for that kind of fight? Was I? The thought of a protracted legal battle, of having my work and my worth publicly questioned, made my stomach turn. But the alternative, walking away, letting Karen continue to profit from my ideas while my career lay in ruins, was unthinkable. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes, I said firmly. Good, Elena replied, and I could hear the approval in her voice. Send me your files, and Sophia, document everything from now on, every conversation, every email, everything. After we hung up, I began compiling the files to send to Elena. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. This is Archer. Got your number from Marcus. Need to talk about Karen. Not what you think. Coffee. Tomorrow. Garden Cafe, 10 a.m. Archer Bennett. The junior designer Karen had assigned to the Peterson project in my place. What could he possibly have to tell me about Karen that I didn't already know? Curiosity won out over caution. I'll be there, I texted back. The Garden Cafe was quiet at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, populated mainly by freelancers with laptops and a few elderly regulars. I spotted Archer immediately, his lanky frame hunched over a table in the corner, 2 coffee cups already in front of him. Thanks for coming, he said, as I took the seat across from him. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed, his usual crisp attire replaced by a rumpled shirt that looked like he had slept in it. You said you needed to talk about Karen, I prompted, accepting the coffee he pushed toward me but not drinking it. Archer glanced around nervously before leaning forward. I think I'm being set up, he whispered. Like you were. I I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. After you left, Karen gave me all these projects, high-profile stuff I'm not ready for. The Peterson Museum, the Lakeside Towers, the new convention center. I was flattered at first, thought she saw something in me. He gave a bitter laugh. But then I started noticing inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? I asked, though I had a growing suspicion. She gives me these concept guidelines to follow, her vision for the projects, she says. But they're not just guidelines, Sophia. They're nearly complete designs, lacking only the technical details and finishes. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. And when I asked about the origin of these concepts, she got defensive, said they were collaborative efforts from the leadership team. I took a sip of my coffee, using the moment to compose my thoughts. Why are you telling me this, Archer? He met my eyes directly for the first time. Because I found your original files for the Peterson project. The ones dated 2 months ago, the ones that match almost exactly the vision Karen told me to execute. My heart hammered in my chest. How did you find them? I've been staying late, trying to keep up with all the work Karen's piled on me. One night, I was searching the server for some reference materials, and I came across a folder of archived projects. Your name was all over the metadata, Sophia. Your designs, your notes, your brilliant solutions, all there, just buried where no one was supposed to look. I set my cup down carefully. Did you confront Karen about this? Archer's laugh was hollow. No, I'm not that stupid, but... He hesitated, then reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a flash drive. I made copies of everything I could find with your name on it, including some files labeled A&H that I don't understand, but that seemed important. He slid the drive across the table to me. I stared at it, barely able to process what he was offering. Why? I finally asked. Why risk your job for this? For me? We barely know each other. Archer's expression hardened. Because it's wrong, what she's doing. Because I got into architecture to create, not to steal other people's creations. And because someday, if I stay at Reynolds, it could be me in your position. I picked up the flash drive, turning it over in my fingers. Thank you, I said simply, knowing the words were inadequate for the risk he had taken. There's one more thing, Archer said, his voice dropping even lower. The board meeting for the Peterson Museum pitch is scheduled for next Friday. Karen's presenting your design as the winning concept. Mr. Reynolds is bringing in all the senior partners for the presentation. It's a big deal for the firm. A plan began to form in my mind, still hazy but with a clear purpose. Will you be at this presentation? I asked. Archer nodded. Karen wants me there to address any technical questions about the execution of my design. Even though it's not really your design. Even though it's not really my design, he confirmed. Shame coloring his features. Look, I need this job, Sophia, but I don't want it like this. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. I understand, and I'm going to need your help, Archer. Would you be willing to do that? Help me expose what Karen's been doing? He hesitated only briefly before nodding. What do you need from me? Over the next hour, Archer and I formed a tentative alliance. He would be my eyes and ears inside Reynolds, keeping me informed of Karen's movements and the details of the upcoming board meeting. In return, I promised that when the time came to reveal the truth, I would make it clear that Archer had been manipulated, not complicit. As we parted ways, outside the cafe, Archer turned to me with an uncertain smile. Do you really think you can take her down? She's got everyone wrapped around her finger, especially Reynolds. I considered his question carefully. I think the truth has a way of coming to light eventually. All I'm going to do is speed up the process. That evening, I received an email from Elena with her assessment of the evidence I had sent her. Her conclusion was both encouraging and sobering. You have a strong case for intellectual property theft, particularly with regard to the designs sold to A&H. However, proving that your termination was retaliatory rather than performance-based will be more challenging without internal corroboration. As we discussed, Litigation would be lengthy and costly, with no guarantee of success. There may be a more direct approach worth considering. Attached to her email was a draft letter addressed to the Reynolds Architecture and Design Board of Directors, outlining in clear, precise legal language the evidence of Karen's misconduct and the potential liability the firm faced as a result. The letter concluded, "My client is prepared to pursue all legal remedies available to her, including but not limited to claims for copyright infringement, wrongful termination, and tortious interference with business relationships. However, she would prefer to resolve this matter directly with the board in a manner that protects both her professional reputation and the firm's standing in the industry." It was perfectly crafted, professional, unimpeachable, and just threatening enough to command attention without burning bridges. But as I read it, I realized it wasn't the approach I wanted to take. Not yet, anyway. I wanted more than a settlement or even reinstatement. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted recognition for the work that had been stolen from me. I wanted Karen to face the consequences of her actions, not in a closed-door meeting with lawyers present, but in front of the people whose respect she had gained through my efforts. I called Elena back. "The letter is perfect," I told her, "but I'd like to hold on to it for now. I have another idea." "Sophia," Elena said, concern evident in her voice, "whatever you're planning, be careful. Karen has already shown she's willing to go to extreme lengths to protect herself." "I know," I replied. "That's exactly what I'm counting on." Over the next week, I worked tirelessly, fueled by a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I organized my evidence into a clear, compelling narrative. I prepared a presentation that laid out, project by project, the evolution of my designs and their subsequent appropriation by Karen. I compiled a separate file documenting the sale of my concepts to Archer and Hayes. Archer kept me updated on developments at Reynolds. Karen was pushing the Peterson Museum project hard, insisting on an accelerated timeline. The board presentation had been moved up to Monday, just 4 days away. "She's nervous," Archer reported during one of our now regular check-ins, snapping at everyone, double and triple checking everything, and she's been having a lot of closed-door meetings with Reynolds. "Has she changed anything about the Peterson design?" I asked. "No, that's the strange part. She's committed to it completely. Keeps talking about how it's going to put Reynolds on the map for cultural institution design. My design, my vision. The one she had dismissed as too conventional before firing me. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so infuriating. On Sunday night, the day before the board meeting, I received a text from Archer that sent a chill through me. Emergency. Karen found out I've been looking at your old files, called me into her office today, threatened to fire me if I continue to undermine her authority. What do we do? I called him immediately. Did she mention me specifically? Does she know we've been in contact? I don't think so, Archer said, his voice shaky. She just said she'd been informed that I was accessing archived files I had no business looking at. Said it looked suspicious. Who could have told her that? It, probably. They monitor unusual server access. I shouldn't have been so careless. I took a deep breath, thinking rapidly. Okay, here's what you need to do. Go to work tomorrow as if nothing is wrong. Act nervous if she's watching you. That's natural given her threat. But don't give her any reason to think you're planning something. And the board meeting? Attend as planned. Say as little as possible. I'll handle the rest. After we hung up, I sat in the dark of my apartment, turning over this new development. Karen was getting suspicious, which meant my window of opportunity was closing. I had to act now, before she had time to cover her tracks more thoroughly. I picked up my phone again and dialed another number. Mr. Reynolds? This is Sophia Vasquez. I apologize for calling you at home on a Sunday, but there's something urgent we need to discuss regarding tomorrow's board meeting. There was a long pause before James Reynolds responded, his voice guarded. Sophia, this is unexpected. Karen informed me that you were no longer with the firm. That's correct, I said, keeping my voice steady. I was terminated nearly 3 weeks ago. That's partly what I need to speak with you about. I'm afraid any concerns about your termination should be addressed through HR. Mr. Reynolds, I cut in, something I had never done in 12 years of working for him. What I have to say concerns the Peterson Museum presentation tomorrow, as well as several other projects that are critical to the firm's reputation. I believe you'll want to hear this directly from me. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him weighing his options. Very well, he finally said. My office, 8 a.m. tomorrow, before the board meeting. Thank you, I said, relief flooding through me. I'll be there. As I hung up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. After weeks of planning, of gathering evidence and building my case, tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow I would finally be heard. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing my presentation one last time, making sure every claim was supported by irrefutable evidence. I laid out my clothes for the morning, a charcoal gray suit I had always reserved for client meetings, professional but not trying too hard. I packed my laptop and an external drive containing backups of all my evidence. Then I tried to sleep, knowing I would need all my mental clarity for what was to come. But rest eluded me. Instead, I found myself thinking about the 12 years I had given to Reynolds architecture and design, the pride I had taken in my work, the joy of creation that had sustained me even as credit for that creation was repeatedly stolen. Tomorrow, one way or another, that chapter of my life would close, and a new one would begin. For the first time in weeks, I smiled into the darkness. Karen thought she had broken me, but she had only forced me to recognize my own strength, a strength I had always possessed, but never fully claimed. The woman who walked into Reynolds Architecture and Design tomorrow would not be the same one who had walked out 3 weeks ago. She would not be silent, she would not be invisible, she would be me, the real me. And it was about time everyone saw who that was. I arrived at Reynolds Architecture and Design at precisely 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before my scheduled meeting, with Mr. Reynolds. The security guard at the front desk did a double take when he saw me. I had been a fixture in this building for so long that my absence, and now my return, seemed to confuse him. Ms. Vasquez, I don't have you on the visitor list. James Reynolds is expecting me, I said calmly, projecting a confidence I was still working to fully embody. We have a meeting at 8. The guard made a quick call, then nodded and handed me a visitor badge. 15th floor, as you know. As I know. Because this had been my professional home for 12 years. Now I was a visitor, with a temporary badge to prove it. The elevator ride up felt surreal. I had taken this same journey thousands of times, but never with stakes this high. Never with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips as they clutched my leather portfolio. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, I was greeted by the familiar glass and steel aesthetic of the Reynolds reception area. Lucia, the receptionist who had been with the firm nearly as long as I had, looked up from her desk with an expression of genuine pleasure. Sophia, it's so good to see you. Her smile faltered slightly as she remembered the circumstances of my departure. Mr. Reynolds said to send you right in when you arrived. He's in the main conference room, not his office. The main conference room, where the board meeting would be held, where Karen would be presenting my Peterson Museum design as her own. Change of plans? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Lucia lowered her voice. The board members started, arriving early. Mr. Reynolds thought it would be more expedient to have your meeting there. Expedient. In other words, whatever I had to say, Reynolds wanted the board to hear it directly. My carefully laid plan was already shifting beneath my feet. I had intended a private conversation with Reynolds first, giving him the opportunity to address Karen's misconduct before it became public knowledge within the firm. But perhaps this was better. Perhaps this was exactly what needed to happen. Thank you, Lucia, I said, adjusting my grip on my portfolio. Is everyone in there already? Just about. Karen's running a bit late. Said she had some last-minute adjustments to make to her presentation. I bet she did. With a deep breath, I made my way down the hallway toward the conference room, my heels clicking purposefully on the polished concrete. Floor. Through the glass walls, I could see that the room was indeed nearly full. Mr. Reynolds sat at the head of the table, surrounded by the other partners. Various department heads occupied the remaining seats, with Archer sitting unobtrusively in a corner, his face pale. As I entered, the conversation ceased abruptly. Every head turned in my direction, expressions ranging from surprise to confusion, to, in Archer's case, barely concealed relief. Sophia, Mr. Reynolds rose to greet me, his professional smile not quite reaching his eyes. Thank you for coming. As you can see, our discussion will need to be brief. We have a full agenda this morning. I understand, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. And I appreciate the opportunity to address the board directly. What I have to discuss concerns everyone in this room. Before Reynolds could respond, the door behind me opened again. I didn't need to turn around to know who had entered. The sudden tension in the room, the way Reynolds's eyes shifted over my shoulder, told me everything. What is she doing here? Karen's voice, sharp with surprise and unmistakable anger. Now I did turn, finding myself face to face with my former supervisor. Karen Mitchell looked immaculate as always in a tailored navy suit, her hair and makeup flawless. But her eyes betrayed her, wide with shock and quickly narrowing with suspicion. Ms. Vasquez has requested this opportunity to address some concerns. About her recent departure from the firm, Reynolds said diplomatically. Given the nature of her call last night, I thought it best to hear her out before we proceed with our regular business. Karen's perfectly manicured hand tightened on the handle of her designer briefcase. James, we have a schedule to maintain. The Peterson presentation. We'll wait 15 minutes, Reynolds cut in, his tone making it clear the matter wasn't up for debate. Please, have a seat, Karen. For a moment, I thought she might refuse. Then, with a tight smile, she took a seat, directly across from where I stood, her posture rigid with hostility. Well, Sophia, Reynolds said, turning back to me, you have our attention. What was so urgent that it couldn't go through proper channels? This was it, the moment I had been preparing for, rehearsing in my mind for weeks. I set my portfolio on the table and looked not at Karen, not at Reynolds, but at each member of the board in turn. For the past 5 years, I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I have watched my work, my original designs, my solutions, my creative vision, being systematically appropriated by Karen Mitchell and presented as her own. The room went completely still. Even the usual shuffle of papers and clicking of pens ceased as all eyes fixed on me. That's absurd, Karen interjected, her laugh brittle. James, this is clearly the reaction of a disgruntled former employee who can't accept that her performance wasn't meeting company standards. My performance, I repeated, turning to face her directly. Let's talk about my performance, shall we? I opened my portfolio and removed a sleek tablet, quickly connecting it to the room's display system. The large screen at the end of the room flickered to life, showing a split screen. On the left, my original design for the Riverfront Hotel renovation, dated 3 years ago. On the right, the same design attributed to Karen Mitchell in the company portfolio. The Riverfront Hotel, I said, addressing the room rather than Karen. My redesign saved the client $300,000 in construction costs while preserving the aesthetic integrity they wanted. Before Karen could interject again, I swiped to the next comparison. The Oakwood Residences, showing my sustainable materials strategy alongside Karen's publicly credited environmental approach. The Oakwood Residences, my innovative use of sustainable materials earned the project a green building certification. Swipe, the Madison Square office tower, my mechanical systems redesigned next to Karen's efficiency model. The Madison Square office tower, My complete redesign of the mechanical systems reduced energy consumption by 40%. With each example, I provided the corresponding evidence. Dated drafts with my electronic signature, emails where I had outlined the concepts, recordings of meetings where I had presented the ideas that later appeared under Karen's name. As the evidence mounted, I could see the board members exchanging glances. Reynolds's expression had darkened, his earlier diplomatic smile nowhere to be seen. Karen's face had drained of color, but she rallied quickly. "These are collaborative projects," she said, her voice tight. "Of course there are similarities. Sophia was part of my team, working under my direction, implementing my vision." "Your vision," I repeated, nodding as if considering her point. "Let's talk about your vision, Karen." I swiped to a new screen, this one showing a folder labeled A&H Proposals. 3 weeks ago, I discovered something disturbing in a shared folder that I shouldn't have had access to. Projects labeled for Archer and Hayes, our direct competitor, that contained my original designs that Karen had rejected for Reynolds' clients but was apparently selling elsewhere. An audible gasp rippled through the room. Reynolds leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "What exactly are you suggesting, Sophia?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Reynolds. I'm stating facts. Karen Mitchell has been selling Reynolds' intellectual property, specifically my designs that she claimed were unsuitable for our clients, to Archer and Hayes for at least 2 years. Karen surged to her feet. "This is slander. I won't sit here and listen to these baseless accusations." "They're not baseless," came a quiet voice from the corner of the room. Archer Bennett stood up, his lanky frame unfolding awkwardly. "I found the same files. When I questioned the origin of certain concept guidelines I was given, I was threatened with termination." "You?" Karen spun to face him, her composure cracking. "You little traitor. After I gave you the opportunity of a lifetime with the Peterson a project based on Sophia's design," Archer cut in, his voice gaining strength. "The same design you told her was too conventional before firing her. The same design you instructed me to develop as if it were my own, based on your vision." Karen turned back to Reynolds, desperation now evident in her expression. "James, surely you aren't buying this conspiracy theory. Archer is clearly in over his head, and Sophia is manipulating him because she's bitter about being let go." Reynolds had remained silent throughout this exchange, his face increasingly grim. Now, he looked directly at me. "These are serious allegations, Sophia. What exactly are you asking for here?" It was the question I had been waiting for. What did I want? Reinstatement? Compensation? An apology? "I want recognition for my work," I said simply. "I want the record corrected. I want the clients I worked with for years to know whose designs they're actually living and working in. And I want assurance that no other designer at Reynolds will have their creativity stolen and their career derailed the way mine was." Reynolds nodded slowly, then turned to Karen. "And what do you have to say to all this, Karen? These—" he gestured at the screen still displaying the damning evidence. Comparisons seemed difficult to explain away as collaboration. Karen's mask of professional composure had completely slipped now. Her eyes darted around the room, finding no allies among the shocked faces of the board members. "This is ridiculous," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "I don't have to defend myself against these accusations. My work speaks for itself." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "It does. But is it really your work, Karen?" I turned back to the display and pulled up one final comparison. On the left, my complete design for the Peterson Museum expansion, dated 2 months ago. On the right, the presentation Karen had prepared for today's meeting. "The Peterson Museum," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "The project I was removed from 3 weeks ago because my ideas were supposedly too conventional. The project that was to be the centerpiece of today's board meeting, my design, my vision, my work." The room fell into stunned silence. Reynolds, stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned to Karen, his expression hardened into something I had never seen before. "Karen, I think you and I need to continue this discussion privately." "James," she began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "Now, Karen." As Reynolds stood, the rest of the board members began to stir uncomfortably, unsure whether to leave or stay. Reynolds addressed them directly. "We'll need to postpone the remainder of today's agenda. I apologize for the inconvenience." Then he turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "Sophia, I would appreciate it if you would wait in my office. This will take some time to sort out, but I think we have more to discuss." I nodded, gathering my materials with hands that had finally begun to shake now that the adrenaline was wearing off. As I made my way to the door, I passed Karen, who stood frozen in place, her perfect facade shattered. "You won't get away with this," she hissed under her breath. "Do you really think they'll choose you over me? I've brought in millions in new business." I paused, meeting her gaze directly. "With my designs," I replied, just loud enough for her to hear. "And no, Karen, I'm not trying to get away with anything. I'm simply reclaiming what's mine. That's the difference between us." I left her standing there, surrounded by the evidence of her deception, and made my way to Reynolds' office. Archer caught up with me in the hallway, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "That was incredible," he said, falling into step beside me. "But what happens now? What happens? To the Peterson project? To me?" I smiled at him, genuinely touched by his concern even in the midst of such chaos. "The Peterson project will go forward with the best design for the client, which happens to be mine. As for you, Archer, you did the right thing in there. That counts for a lot." "I hope so," he said, looking younger than his 26 years. "I really do want to learn, Sophia, to create my own design someday, not just execute someone else's vision." "And you will," I assured him, "with the right mentor." Reynolds's secretary directed me to take a seat in his office, informing me that he might be some time. I settled into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, finally allowing myself to breathe normally for what felt like the first time all morning. I had done it. I had faced Karen, faced the board, and presented my case with the dignity and evidence it deserved. Whatever happened next, I had stood up for myself and my work. No one could take that away from me. An hour passed before Reynolds finally returned, looking exhausted but resolved. He closed the door behind him and took a seat not behind his desk, as I expected, but in the chair beside mine. "Sophia," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "I owe you an apology, a profound one. Of all the outcomes I had anticipated, this wasn't one of them." Reynolds had always been fair but distant, a typical executive who delegated the day-to-day oversight of his employees to managers like Karen. In 12 years, I had never heard him apologize to anyone. "Karen Mitchell is no longer employed by Reynolds Architecture and Design," he continued when I didn't respond. "We'll be conducting a thorough review of all projects she supervised, and I've instructed our legal team to prepare appropriate communications to clients whose projects may have been affected by her misconduct." "And Archer and Hayes?" I asked, thinking of the designs Karen had sold to our competitor. Reynolds's expression hardened again. "We'll be addressing that issue separately, with legal counsel, but that's not what I want to discuss with you today." He shifted in his chair, looking me directly in the eye. "The truth is, Sophia, I failed you. I failed to recognize your contributions. I failed to question Karen when she recommended your termination. I failed to create an environment where creativity is properly attributed and rewarded." I hadn't expected this level of self-reflection from him, and it momentarily left me speechless. Reynolds continued into the silence. "I'd like to offer you your position back, but frankly, that seems inadequate given the circumstances. Instead, I'm proposing something different." He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a folded document, handing it to me. "This is a preliminary offer," he said as I unfolded the paper. "The board and I are prepared to create a new position, Creative Director of Cultural and Institutional Projects, reporting directly to me. Full creative control, proper attribution for all designs, and oversight of your own team, including young designers like Archer who could benefit from your mentorship." I scanned the document, taking in the details. A salary nearly double what I had been making before, equity in the firm, a seat at the leadership table. "Why?" I asked, looking up from the paper. "Why this, rather than just reinstating me and apologizing publicly?" Reynolds smiled slightly, the first genuine smile I had seen from him that day. "Because you've demonstrated something remarkable, Sophia. Not just design talent, I always knew you had that, but leadership, integrity, strategic thinking. You gathered evidence, built a case, and presented it with professionalism, even in the face of personal injustice. Those are qualities we need more of at Reynolds, especially now." He stood, moving to look out the window at the city skyline. "This firm has lost its way somewhat, I think. Becomes too focused on flash over substance, on who can take credit rather than who can deliver quality. Your situation has made that painfully clear." Turning back to me, he added, "You don't have to decide now. Take the weekend to think about it. Talk to legal counsel if you want. You'd be wise to do so. But I hope you'll consider it." I rose to my feet, the offer still in my hand. "I'll consider it," I said, finding that I meant it despite everything that had happened. "But I have one condition that's non-negotiable." "Name it," Reynolds said. "The Peterson Museum project. I want formal recognition as the lead designer, both internally and with the client." Reynolds nodded without hesitation. "Already done. I've spoken with the museum director personally. She's eager to meet the actual mind behind the design she's been so impressed with." As I gathered my things to leave, Reynolds added, "The presentation to the museum board is next Thursday. I'd be honored if you would lead it, regardless of your decision about the position." I paused at the door, turning back to face him. "I'll be there," I said. "That design means a lot to me." "As it should," Reynolds replied. "It's brilliant work, Sophia. It always was." As I walked out of Reynolds Architecture and Design that morning, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I had been vindicated, though I had. Not because Karen had been exposed, though she had. Not even because I had been offered a prestigious new position, though the opportunity was tremendous. I felt lighter because for the first time, in too long, I had stood up for my work, for my vision, for myself. I had refused to remain silent in the face of injustice. I had reclaimed not just my designs, but my voice. The city stretched before me, bathed in spring sunlight. I had no idea whether I would accept Reynolds's offer or chart a new path entirely, but I knew with absolute certainty that whatever I chose, I would never again allow my light to be dimmed by someone else's shadow. I pulled out my phone and called Elena. "It's done," I told her when she answered, "and you'll never believe what happened next." As I recounted the morning's events, I found myself smiling. The future suddenly seemed full of possibilities, not because someone else had finally recognized my worth, but because I had recognized it myself. That was the real victory. That was the power no one could ever take from me again. "So what will you do?" Elena asked when I had finished my story. "Take the position?" I looked up at the gleaming towers of the city, each one a testament to someone's vision brought to life. Somewhere among them was a museum waiting for my design, waiting for the spaces I had imagined to become reality. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But whatever I decide, it will be on my terms, my vision, my voice." And in that moment, that was more than enough. It was everything.